God put the curtain back and told me to show to you. The world's been playing you, seducing and tricking you. Now what are you gonna do? 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 The world's been playing you, the world's been playing you, deceiving and fooling you, seducing and tricking you. Now what are you gonna do? Now what are you gonna do?
Welcome to the guild. Yeah. Welcome to the guild. Welcome to the guild. Yeah. Welcome to the guild. Excellency guild. Welcome. Excellency guild. Excellency guild. Welcome. Excellency guild. Welcome to the guild. Yeah.
Hi, welcome to the Excellency Guild show, where keeping it God means keeping it real, and that's keeping it 100. I'm your host, David Rogers. Host Kevin Sullivan cannot be here today, but he's working on some exciting projects that you'll hear about in the future. We have a great show today. Today's show is about preparing for the 21st century. We want to demonstrate how the Excellency Guild, or our official name is the Guild of His Excellency, but for short we call ourselves the Guild, or the Excellency Guild. And I want to discuss the challenges of the 21st century and what exactly are we preparing, what do we intend on grooming the youth for. There are lots of challenges that they have carried over from the past into the 21st century. Right now, as a group, we're not doing as well as we should be in the 21st century. But we want the 21st century to be much better than the 20th century, and better than the 19th century and the 18th century. We've been under siege for a very long time as a group, or as a collective, as a global collective, which we call Black people or African people. So I want to go through. First, I want to speak briefly about the Excellency Guild and the goal of the Excellency Guild. The Excellency Guild was founded by Mr. Kevin Sullivan, and I'm working with Kevin to launch this organization in which we will pair Black youth with competent professionals, not just professionals, but as part of the main focus of the Excellency Guild is to identify aspirations and also identify the aptitude of many of our youth, so that we can place them with the right people that they can coordinate with, and the right people that can counsel them to help them and put them on a path towards success. Now, this is very, very important, largely because, as I've said many times before, and I know I sound like a broken record, but this is a conviction that I have based on my background. As I've said before, I'm a geographer and a urban and regional planner, and so I understand the necessity for human capital. That, other than physical resources, that is really the difference between successful people or successful groups, successful regions, and unsuccessful regions. And we want to be a successful group of people. We want to enjoy the fruits of being a creative people, a people that is lauded for our creativity and genius. but it's also lauded for our intellect and our ability to think and exert influence in the world. And we can start by developing the black youth. And when I say black youth, I'm talking about everyone from school age, which is about 5 years old, 5 all the way up to 17 years old. And that's from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. So this is the demographic that we intend on targeting with the Excellency Guild. And right now we're starting small. We're focusing in on Baltimore, as well as Beaufort, South Carolina, which is the hometown of Mr. Kevin Sullivan, and eventually we will branch out into Eastern North Carolina, where I'm from, and then on to other places. But we're starting out trying to change the world by changing our own corner of the world first. So we understand that the world has changed a bit, and there are a lot of challenges of the 21st century that the youth will face that will render the world different and make the world a radically different place than the world in which we Gen Xers like myself and like Kevin, and a world that's even different from our parents' generation and our grandparents. It's a radically different world with less resources, a much meaner world, and a world in which you have to be prepared if you want to derive any high standard of living. And I will dedicate my life to this, and that is to prevent black people from being at the bottom in the 21st century. We've had that position in the past couple of centuries, really the past 400 or 500 years, and we want the 21st century to be different. So one of the main challenges of the 21st century is actually more of the same, and that's increased racism. Given the current conditions in the world today, where you have Donald Trump, and you have a repackaging of old-fashioned racism, but in a new uniform, if you will, called the alternative right or alt-right. So you're seeing a surge of this, not only in America, but also in Europe and in other places that have been colonized by the Western world. So you're seeing a resurgence of racism. So what's going on in the United States? Well, in the United States, there is an effort, a coordinated effort to roll back many of the gains that blacks have received during the civil rights movement. And in order to prevent that from happening, we have to have competent, intelligent people that will form the front lines of the defense of the interests of black people. And that's one of the main things we want to do with this group. Not saying it all, and I want to make it very clear, this is not a racist statement. This is a statement of fact, a statement of an assessment of real issues. So I'm not saying at all that all white people, all individuals white individuals are bad. So You can continue to hang out after work with your white buddies, or you can continue to have a relationship with certain good individuals that you brought into your lives. I'm not at all talking about individuals, but I am saying that as a collective, this is what is going on. That there is a resurgence of racism in America and abroad that is working to challenge the advancement of black people and to continue the domination of the wealth and the influence and the economies of the world. And when we can counter that by developing the human capital that we have instead of squandering, and this is a very good opportunity. We have to stop looking at problems as just problems. We have to look at problems as an opportunity to get better as a group. Now, so we're dealing with not only the legacy of racism in the past that influences where we live and how much wealth we have, that influences access to opportunities. But actually, racism, which brings me to my next challenge, racism is not going to be the predominant the predominant problem of the 21st century for black folks. Ironically, it will be the power void that is looming in the horizon, the power void of the decline of the Western world, or the decline of the white collectives' influence in the world. Right now, there is a projected population collapse of white people in Europe. So in the future, they will not be able to have a viable economy or sustain a viable economy without immigration. Right here in the United States, the white population is expected to decline after 2050. Now, and I don't want to do like many nationalists do on YouTube and in other venues where they look at this as a good thing. I want to state this as a matter of fact and give you information that we can use as a people to deal with the implications of this fact. So what are the implications of a declining white world, a world in which you are inextricably tied to? What are the challenges of this changing world in the 21st century? Well, you will not have the luxury of eating off the crumbs and the scraps from white America or Europe's table. You will not have the luxury of doing that. You will have to have competent people who can produce the goods and services that we need to sustain civilization, to maintain a higher standard of living and comfort. And this is going to be an even bigger challenge than racism. Because if we do not meet this challenge, if we do not develop our youth and make them competent, responsible people, because it's not enough just to educate young people. We have to make them committed to the advancement and well-being of black people. Because in the past, where we've, as a people, emphasized education, we've created classes of people that were twisted in a sense. They were self-absorbed, self-important. And this is not what the kind of individual or kind of personality we want to cultivate. We want to cultivate a personality in the youth that is committed to the advancement and the protection and the provision of goods and services for black people. So why is this important? Because if right now, if we had to depend on black people for clothing and food and shelter, there wouldn't be enough of any of it. So we rant and rave about racism and how we're not being treated fairly, and yet we're in a position where we depended on these people who are in flux, if you will. We are witnessing a radical shift in power in the world. And it is not enough to just have an absence of racism or the absence of white people who are working against your interests. You have to be prepared for a world in which they may not be the top people, and it may be somebody else to fill their place. And right now, Europe is doing everything it can to stay in the game. And we have to consider what will happen if there's a power void. If there's a power void, what if tomorrow white people become like different groups in the past, like the Egyptians? People who used to be powerful, but they are no longer powerful, like the Babylonians, like the Romans, the Greeks. People who used to be powerful, but they are no longer powerful. What we know from history is whenever there's a power void, there's a jockeying for the top position, and that is it is very it's a very confusing time when this happens, and this is going to happen globally. You'll start to see Asia flex its muscles. You'll start to see various parts of Africa rising and advancing. You're starting to see Latin America wake up. But we have to ask the question, as a global collective, black people, where do you want to be in this upheaval? Do you want to remain at the bottom? Or do you want to be a contender in the competition for resources globally? And this is something we have to consider when we're talking about our children. I can tell you right now that our children at this very moment are not prepared to deal with this, because if America in 2050, after 2050, there's going to be a significant population decline of whites. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of America will we have in the absence of white power and domination? We have to ask ourselves that question. And we have to ask ourselves, what will be the intentions of other groups toward us? And we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared for a world? Because let me tell you something, and I've thought a lot about this. If we are not prepared for a world in which white people do not dominate, and then all the other groups are competing for resources and competing for opportunity, and competing for dominance, we will long for the days of racism. We will actually lament the days of segregation, because at least we will have food. And it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I am dead serious. And this is why we have to cultivate a kind of youth that can rise to the occasion of meeting the challenges that we will face in the 21st century as a collective, not only here in the United States, but again, all over the world, the Caribbean, Africa. Right now, the Chinese and other groups are buying up huge tracts of entire countries because the name of the game, and the name of the game has always been land, because land equals resources. So we have to keep this in mind, that this is bigger than your child going to college and being able to buy nice things and drive a BMW. This is bigger than that. This is developing human capital or community capital. And we want to start to address these issues in an area that I think is the epicenter of black destruction, and that's right here in Baltimore. If it can work here, it can work anywhere. And hopefully, and not, I'm not gonna say hopefully, because I don't believe in hope. I believe either you meet the challenge or you don't. We will prevail in Baltimore. We will prevail in Baltimore. And the children here in the future, we will cultivate a class of people, class of competent people that can get things done. Another thing I want to say concerning the looming power void is that we have to stop thinking in terms of, we have to stop acting like a guest in our own home. America is our home, and we've earned every right, every fruit that America has to offer. So if America is ours, we need to start thinking of it as ours, and need to start positioning ourselves to be a full participant in the American way of life, not to be on the periphery. You see, and that means we have to create the kinds of people that are capable of taking over a corporation and hiring black people and cultivating talent, so that when the power void happens, that this country doesn't descend into a cesspool. Now, we need to look at the cities as an example of this. Baltimore, Detroit. We came to these cities in the Great Migration to eat off the fat that was being produced by somebody else. And then when these people left the city and went to other regions, and jobs went out of the country even, there was no fat to be eaten. And we failed to develop our own fat so that we can consume ourselves, and we can also feed other people. So the cities gives us a glimpse into a future, if we don't prepare, the kind of future that we don't want if we don't prepare for the 21st century. Can you imagine all of America being like Detroit, Baltimore, Gary, Indiana? There's no reason why black people couldn't have taken over that steel industry in Gary, Indiana. But we were thinking in terms of workers. We were thinking and it's rooted in our belief that we are just mere guests in somebody else's house. No, we built this house and this is our house, and we need to take control of it. How do you take control of it? First, you need to buy into the idea that it's your house. Secondly, you need to gain the skills and the know-how to run the house. There are countries in Africa right now, if an elevator breaks, they have to literally go get somebody from Europe to fly in to repair it. See, you don't want that kind of world. So we have to develop our human capital to deal with the daily problems that occur. So I have very little time left. So I'm going to briefly talk about education. We want to develop youth that can go into these HBCUs, these historically black colleges and universities, so that the HBCUs can be used as an incubator for black talent. And we want to inculcate an ideology of self-reliance and black interest into these young people, so that when they come out of college and they're making all of this money and they're making moves not only on their own behalf but on the behalf of the entire group. So we don't want to make sick, twisted people that are only concerned about themselves. We want to make people who are committed to the advancement of this group of people. Now, I spoke briefly about economy. So we need to develop, and the challenge is, one of the other challenges, other than education, is also economy. We need to develop local, national, and global economy that's interlinked. We have to bear in mind that our approach to economy is incorrect. We always approach economy from the standpoint of white people giving us jobs or white people producing jobs. Right now, the mayor of Baltimore and the mayors of many other predominantly black cities, they always approach economy from the standpoint of bringing in the rich white people or the affluent white people, instead of developing the human capital that's already there. That all they want is an opportunity. And it's not going to work in the 21st century because those populations are not going to be there in the long term. So for you to eat off of. So you have to build your own. You have to build your own table and bake your own bread. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do with the Excellency Guild, is create those competent people that can get the job done. Now, we have to keep in mind that we have to ask ourselves, how did whites become successful? Well, did whites become successful by trading outside of themselves? Well, initially. They traded with Asia for spices and different fabrics in the during the Renaissance. That's when Europe began to open up to other markets. But once Europe gained all kinds of knowledge and techniques and technologies from Asia, and it was able to sustain itself, it created colonies around the world. But they didn't trade with the natives of those colonies. They traded with other white people. So what lesson can you learn from that bit of history? That the key to our success is raising the standard of living for black people around the world, to the extent that we are that these various groups, whether you're in the Caribbean, the United States, or Africa, that all of these groups represent markets that we can buy and sell with. You know, shoes manufactured in Mississippi can be shipped to Nigeria. Steel manufactured in Nigeria can be shipped to Kingston, Jamaica, and used in buildings built in Kingston, Jamaica. We're talking about a triangular global economy. But you can't have that when you do not have the human capital to do it. And if you don't have the local economy, strong local economies here in the United States, it actually begins here in the United States. If Black America had the kind of education that Nigeria has, Nigeria is full of PhDs, full of engineers. That's like the preferred field in Nigerians. They actually have a culture where they encourage their kids to be engineers. Now, we have a culture where we encourage people to just go to school and major in sociology, where you can literally sleep in that class and get an A. And then the person comes out, they have a degree for bragging rights, but the degree doesn't really enhance black people in America. But you have engineers and people in the sciences. You will have people that can help grow the black economy here in America, and we can have a transfer of information from America to Africa to the Caribbean, constantly trading information and goods and services, trading amongst ourselves. We are more than 1 billion strong globally, and we have 41 million people here in the United States, including Caribbean Americans and some Africans. I think that their numbers here in America total about 1 million. So we are strategically spanned around the globe to where we can have in a global economy. So that's something to keep in mind. And another challenge is environment, which is rarely talked about in the black community, because all of our immediate needs are so great that we can't really think about clean water, but we should be thinking about clean water and clean air and physical resources. I put this up. I made this. I wanted to address this 21st century challenge for Black America, because we do not want to copy everything from the European. And what I mean is, when they came into the 20th century with the booming industrial revolution, their approach to things were very wrong. That is, they believed in consuming a resource until it was exhausted, and so you had entire industries collapsing from this approach. They would come in to places where there were plenty of timber, and in a matter of not even a full century, they would deplete the resource. And not only would they deplete the forest resource, they would actually make the rivers and streams incapable of sustaining life, because the runoff from the cleared forest would choke the life out of the streams and rivers, and now you have a reduced food supply. So we don't want to approach. We want to combine the discoveries and advancements of the Western world of the 20th century with our values of environmental sustainability that goes back to our ancient African ancestors. So I'm about to run out of time, but I want to quickly talk about politics. We need to we need to funnel all of these different things that I just talked about into leveraging politics. So, in closing, what I just gave you is the context in which Kevin and myself are working in, the global context, the local and the global context, and identified what's at stake and why we need to develop our human capital. Now, I do want to close out with this one paradigm, and that is what I call the good brick principle. The integrity of a wall is only as good as the bricks that it's composed of. And I challenge myself and everyone that is watching to be a good brick so that we can maintain the integrity of the black community. Thank you for listening, and God bless.